Uh, Hello, everybody. Today we have a most wonderful view of some of the Yorkshire fields with the poppies. It's a time when you can go out for your walks and start spotting where those poppies are popping out. Popping out poppies. So gorgeous, gorgeous reds, kind of pinky reds, orangey reds. Lovely, lovely setting off against the greens. Classic Monet's color combinations, so opposite colors. So two colors which lie on a color wheel totally in opposite directions. That's why we call them opposite colors or complementary colors. Now, painting with acrylics with opposite colors is a little bit easier rather than with watercolors or with oil paints, because the colors are smudging quite easily and it's quite hard to keep that layering, keep that the colors, both the greens and the reds, separately. Okay, because if we mix them together, we're going to have muddy colors, we're going to have grays. So we're going to try to minimize that, and for that we'll need quite a bit of planning and color practicing. So what we'll do first, we'll do our color composition, our sketch, and then we'll practice mixing some of the greens and some of the reds as we paint. Okay, so first of all, I have my white, I have my emerald green, cerulean blue or any other light blue, and some magenta or any other pinky red, maybe a crimson red. Okay, so I'm going to sketch on my pink background. The reason I've got a pink background, it also should support some of our greens. So if we have little gaps between some of the grasses when we paint, and you leave some of the pink, that will be totally fine. So we can have some of that glow of red, of pink behind our field. Okay, that should help us out. So if before we worked from the artist's work, today we also have another task of working from a photograph. So we're going to try to bring some of the ideas we use, kind of color combinations we used in the previous week. So today we've got a little bit more tricky task to work with what we directly see, but how we can interpret it. That will be a wonderful approach at looking at. Okay, so let's start with composition overall. I have very, very small amount of sky with some darker trees at the back. So it's probably, if I divide the paper into half, way less than a third even, right? So if that's a half quarter, probably less than a quarter even space. So let me just move that one away. I'll use a little bit of turbs, a little bit of white, and I'm going to sketch with emerald green, but very light emerald green. So a dab of emerald green and white. I'll keep it reasonably diluted so I can wipe it off. So I don't want it to be too thick. As I said, we don't want red overlapping too much with green today. Okay. So if this is my halfway through, this is my quarter, so it should be a bit even less than a quarter. Now on the screen we might see, and it's very, very little of sky on the left hand side. So on the screen we might see that light green almost burning our eyes because the contrast of color is so strong. Well, actually it's burning my eyes just looking at my board here. Okay, so we've got a nice slant over the diagonal. Might make it tiny bit more less sharp. Maybe I'll just do a little dip here, and then it's going to be maybe a little bit more straight. I think that will be a little bit easier for the eye to see. So I'll use my tissue to gently wipe this. Okay. The next point, our key element, is our large poppy on the foreground. This is the photograph I took about this time last year, and kind of zooming in into that photograph, zooming into all that foreground makes the whole composition very, very exciting. So I'm going to put this poppy very lightly with my brush, just in case, tiny bit larger than it might be. I'd prefer to do it larger than smaller, because I want my colors to stay maybe fresher, my reds to stay fresher. I just want to make it roughly quite large, as a big shape, maybe something like that. Okay, nice and big shape. Even if you put it in a big box, almost like a big square or big rectangle, it's fine. Okay. And then I'm looking for a couple of grasses, 2-3 shapes. So maybe this diagonal line, maybe that diagonal line, going maybe almost to the horizon here. Maybe the stem of the poppy itself, kind of the proportions of these lines. They will divide the whole composition into big kind of areas. So if one's going to come, I'm going to decide how it's going to go. Maybe that's what I need to know. If I need to move my flower, maybe I will need to move my flower actually a little bit here. Right, I'm going to leave the flower as it is. I'm going to do my grasses and then come back to moving it about. So this big diagonal, I think it's going over the horizon and quite vertical. It goes further than halfway through of my piece, of my surface, maybe up like that. So I really want it to be bold and strong. Okay. Because in a way we're going to have a lower part of the painting or a higher. We kind of divide the whole paint into those influence areas. Okay, so that box will need to be moved. That's okay. So if you're wiping things off like I am, just make sure you keep things dry. Okay, we can paint on you know, if that pink is a bit grayish now, that's totally fine because it's dry. So I can quite happily introduce other colors on top. I've got one big diagonal and I've got another big diagonal coming up, probably less than, so if that's my halfway through point, a little bit higher from it, and it touches the horizon, maybe just even going over the horizon. Nice big arch. Okay, I want to make it nice and archy. Okay, so something like that, that's nice. Okay. There's another little line coming up. It's not very important, but it's in a way helps this diagonal to come across. Maybe another little one, kind of supporting each other. Yeah, and as I said, the third main diagonal is going to come up for the stem of the flower. So if I would have carried on that stem of the flower, how I would have been going. Yeah, it's also kind of continues with some of the excuse me, some of these grasses falling down here. Again, a little bit starting on the right hand side of the painting and carries on. Okay, I'm going to use the same kind of direction, just a little bit higher. So that's how my those lines, if these ones at the moment a little bit parallel, I'll have to keep an eye on them and maybe lean some of them a bit more lower. Maybe this one, that one. So they tiny bit changing in its shape. There's another supporting line to this one is somewhere here. Okay. Or somewhere here. Again, we probably, when we start painting, we're going to lose them, but it gives us an idea of planning, reminding of, you know, even if I've done, let's say, 1 line, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the main stem 6, even if I've done all 6 lines and it just reinforced the line of the stem here for me, that's a wonderful approach. Okay. And then we have the main trees, silhouettes against the sky. So if I'll make them tiny bit more darker, well, it doesn't matter because we're going to be painting over them very shortly. Actually, maybe I'm not going to even do that. I'm going to do it with a different color. So I'm going to just wipe my brush and use a little bit of white and what's left of the green on my brush. So I have a larger silhouette of the tree on the right hand side here. I have a medium one, so that's need to be just on the edge of my flower somewhere here. I'll come back to the shape of the flower. Maybe somewhere here. So what I'm painting kind of that negative space of the trees. Okay, so in a way, trying to find the silhouette, they will remain against the white sky. So, you know, if I would have done it like that. I'm going to come back to it, but this is what I'm thinking. This is how I'm looking for those shapes. And this is going to be my smaller tree. Just to give us an idea what we're looking for, those shapes. So again, classic shapes, a very large one, a medium, and a small. We've got that variety. We've got that variety of spaces in between them. Spaces left between them themselves and whatever we've got at the back here. That's all good. And I need to correct the shape of my flower, so I moved it. It's a little bit awkward looking, but what I'll do, I'll just use magenta on its own, just dilute it with some water, with some tab, sorry. Again, I'm still painting with tabs without the oil because I just want that thin layer, because we're painting straight away with thicker layers afterwards. So tabs are easy to, a little bit of drying surface. Right, so now I know where my stem is going to be. Now I can see, I think that's where the base of my flower is going to be. And again, I'll just do, okay, I quite like that diagonal here. Let's lift it higher than still. Let's lift it even higher. Okay. So just maybe just next to that diagonal. Okay, nice and big chunk for 2 petals here. Okay, and it's almost like a V shape for the whole flower. And that leaf will stay somewhere here, or petal. Okay. Okay, nice V shape for the depths, how the petals come together. Okay. What I will do as well, I'll wash off any of the greens within the flower, so they're not interacting too much. So in a way, what we've done, we've created an entry point for the composition going through some of these diagonals of the grasses and the stem. We will have more highlights here, so our eye will look more for entrance here. Another entrance could have been here, which will have loads of darkness, and that will lead us through there as well. And lead, so it could be coming here to the flower, following the stems, and then turning some of these stems will be turning, there will be some more flowers and kind of staying it all here. If it's eye will come here, that will be very similar, just staying here and then just going through that spiral. We'll see which one will trigger, well, maybe both. We've got that spiral within the composition. Right, well, I have my magenta on the brush. I'm also going to put a couple of flowers in the middle ground, very lightly. There's some larger shapes flowers. If I'll put them into a couple of boxes, almost like, might exaggerate their size, slightly larger. Now the smaller ones I'll leave out, so those ones will be the larger, maybe another third one somewhere here in the border. The smaller ones will work on top of all the grasses. So basically, if we can paint the greens around those big shapes, the main flower and the three smaller ones, that would be great. All the other ones we can add at the top. Right, and while we have our first three colors on white, I'd like us to paint our sky. Now I'm going to use a little bit of oil now. So a dab of oil. Most of the sky is going to be very light, but I don't want to keep it just plain white or just pale blue. I want to see some of that pink of the background. I want to see of the primer. I want to see some of maybe magenta. I do want to see a little bit more color in it. So I'm using some white. And let's start with a little bit magenta first. If you're using crimson, maybe just add a hint of blue to it, or a hint of violet, purple, just to make it a tiny bit cooler. Okay. So I'm going to balance my overall colors on the sky. So if I'll have something a bit more pinky here, right, tiny bit more stronger. So not as strong as my background, but I do want to see it there. Right, and let's put maybe different strokes. Let's do some vertical strokes maybe here. And somewhere, some of the pink maybe somewhere on top. And somewhere in the corner here. If you're picking up some of the green from some of your lines, just be careful so it doesn't spread too much. So I have the pink spreading through the sky. And then I'm gonna go for a little more white, a little bit more thicker in paint, and some blue. So I've got my cerulean blue here. I need it, let me just check against it. Okay, I need it light, but not off-white. I don't want it to be medium tone either. So something close, the darkest light we can get. And let's just place it here at the top and see how the colors interact together. That's good. So a little bit similar in darkness here at the moment to some of the pinks. It is darker, but maybe not significantly. I do want it to be a bit more darker close to this, to the ground. Somewhere here. Somewhere longer. And one of the paintings from last few weeks, we were working on the sky using those vertical strokes, and that's given us quite a lot of depth. So we have a view here, so we're at the bottom of the field and we're looking up. The field is going in front of us here, going raising up. So those strokes might help us out to show that depth of the sky. Okay, maybe some more blue somewhere here. Now, if your blue is mixing with the pinks and you start having some more purples, that's fine. If you end up preserving some of the fresh pink, that's wonderful. Okay. And my next step for the sky, so I've done my pale pinks, I've done some of the blues, kind of almost filled the rest of the space. Now the reason I painted over this larger tree, there might be some gaps between its branches, so I just went around it a bit more. I'm going to wipe my brush now, and I'm going to use just a fresh white. If you want a dab of oil just to make it a little bit easy to move or to apply on your bristles. So it needs to be quite thick white. And we'll do some of the fresh white strokes on the sky. It's probably will not end up purely white in some places, which is fine. That's why we're starting with freshness of it. So I want to place a few of those strokes to get nice contrast of color, maybe somewhere here close to the horizon. Maybe somewhere here close to the tree, maybe a spot. I haven't decided how big they're going to be, so I haven't merged them with anything yet. I'm just going to decide on their placement, or how much of that white is going to be here. I think maybe a couple of strokes here. Maybe somewhere here. Okay. So now I'm happy with my kind of location of the whites. Now I can just or get better shapes for them, or better outline, not that outlines, kind of blending. For example, this one's got loads of strokes. Maybe I'll soften it in between them. Maybe partially here it could be blended with a blue. You can use your finger, you can use your brush. You can have both. Okay, I have to soften this connection here. I have to keep those shapes of white slightly changing. Looks like immediately we've got a cloud building up here. Okay, a bit of gap here. So the thicker the whites in this case, the easier it will be for you to keep it light. Okay. Now, don't be overly worried about the strokes, because don't forget we're going to be painting all the grasses over them soon. So if you do have quite a lot of color going on, you don't have to be overly precise with the strokes. Okay, the background for our painting for later. Right, so we've got that variety going. And to offset our lights on the sky, we also have some highlights with some wheat. I think it's maybe wheat or barley. I think maybe barley. I've got lovely, lovely elongated, feathery grains here. So I'll use some pale blue, so one of my blues, and some white. And just give myself an idea where some of those lighter highlights are going to be. Maybe a nice, so I'm kind of sketching. I'm not making it too solid. I just want to put a little bit of pale blue and white mixture. So when I start working with my greens, every time I kind of come close to those areas, my color will immediately stay pale. There's another corner group of those barley, feathery crops. If I'll make them tiny bit here. Okay. You can also see a really bold reflection on this grass. Okay, again, it's not going to be my final highlight, but it's offset some of that beautiful light. That's our sky reflecting on those surfaces. And I think that's the one, that's the line we did before. Another light line here, but I don't think it's overly significant for us, so I'm going to keep it there. And then the whole field is divided into two sections for us. We're going to have a warm part of it, kind of sunny part of it, and a cooler part of it. And using the same color, again, blue and white, I'm going to subdivide it roughly. So I'm going to give myself a rough placement where that warmth of the field is going to be finishing. Kind of in between, we're going to have loads of highlights against the cool colors. Okay, I'm making it into slightly kind of a V shape, a slightly kind of bend towards my flower. Okay, so I almost got like a width of the highlight of my cooler sides of the field as well. So we're making our fields very two-dimensional. Right, now we're going to mix a little bit of color for our grasses. Our key colors are going to be emerald green. So this is already what we used. I'm going to use a bit of tips to do the color mixing. Okay, so a darker green. And there will be loads of just loads of tonal changes of that green. So to make it slightly lighter, and again, tiny bit more lighter. And against the pink, just that tonal change will be really wonderfully settling into the painting. Okay, maybe quite pale. Let's have a look. So when we look at the bottom part of the paint of the photograph, we can kind of give ourselves an idea that it could be much more cooler, and we might have more tonal application of color. Might have a little bit of warmth, but not significant. So in that sense, that's going to be quite simplified. What I also want to use here, I want to use a hint of or magenta or purple. Let me just see how magenta mixes with it. Yeah, it just does the same thing. It's just a smaller scale of it. So if I have a dab of magenta with my green, I'm going to start having more of those purpley greens, purpley grays. And then if I'll start increasing the darkness of the green and the volume kind of magenta, the amount of magenta I'm adding. So it's a little bit less fresh green, but you've got that sophisticatedness of that grayness, that purpliness. Okay, so that will be gorgeous. What we don't want browny mucky color. We wanted the quality of the grays is good, but the brown muckiness might not be so pleasant. Okay, so let's put more of that violety purple in color. It's going to start reflecting here. I'll put higher, that's better. And if I'll go for even more green and more magenta. So I can see some of these shadows are probably done with that color combination, magenta and emerald green. Okay, so from very fresh greens to a little bit more easier to eye, a bit more natural looking greens. I just put one in the middle as well, kind of between those two. Not as dark, but also still full of color. Okay, just looks quite dark for you. Okay. Fantastic. And I'd like us to use some of these colors straight away while we have them on our palette, as we have them right in front of us. And I'd like to start with painting our trees at the back. So we need one of those darker colors. I'm just going to mix a little bit more of it. So magenta, or if you're using violet, a small amount of violet and emerald green. I think I need more magenta here. So I don't want it to appear too green. I've got that a little bit more darker tone. That's lovely. And so it's quite a thick paint. I'm going to go straight away into my tree here. If it picks up some of the color from the sky, it's okay. I'm interested into those lovely shapes, kind of a bit of a silhouette building up on that tree. Okay, maybe this come a little bit lower. And also how low, and the base of that tree, what silhouette it's going to have, kind of to show that slant of the hill, or how the shadow under the tree develops. Can work within it's the bottom part later on, but something a little bit more darker that way. Okay. Now trees at the back are out of focus. At the moment, my tree stands out very, very boldly. So I'm going to leave it as it is for the moment. I want to work with the other darker tones first. So let me top up my magenta here as I'm running out. I'm going to drop my paints here, my paints mixing. So similar thing, I'm going to have the next tree, the smaller tree, maybe with a little bit more magenta. Okay, it's quite small. It's a little bit darker at the top and slightly lighter towards the bottom. So if I'll start it darker at the top, I might just leave it at the bottom. I love if you do leave a couple of droplets, kind of a couple of spaces of the pink background. That's great. If it didn't quite happen, don't worry about it. There is an awkward flower on that area. Awkward, not sure if we're going to use it or not. But for the moment, I'm going to ignore it. I'm just going to think about the tree altogether. So that's will be coming here. And I also am going to make some darker tone for the tree on the right hand side. Again, if you are changing its color, maybe from a little bit darker to the top, I want to make the branches going into the kind of the lights of the sky. Painting over some of the spaces here, leaving some of the gaps if possible. Stay darker in the center and top. And it's going to go a little lighter towards the bottom. You can have more green, or you can have a bit of magenta, or just a little bit of white. So my tree is changing its darkness as well as color through its height. Okay, something's going to be chopping into the field here. I've lost some of my sky highlights within its branches. I might have to come back to it. I'm going to put a little bit of light at the bottom of my small tree while I have it on my brush. And a little bit of light on the bottom of my tree on the left. And also on the borders of my left tree, I'll have tiny bit of lighter strokes. So they just don't look perfectly sharp against the white. We just redirect some of my darker greens now, so they support in the shape of my tree. That's better. redirecting some of the shadow of my right tree. Otherwise it does look a bit, the dark stopped halfway through. Maybe it will be branches which will catch some light and others keep some darkness in it. Okay, that's better. My small tree, I think, still could have a tiny bit more lighter tone at the base. I'd say that's better. And I can see some of the darkness of the shadows, the coolness of the shadows present on the horizon on the left-hand side. So that probably maybe another group of trees, maybe just a shadow from something else in there. So I'll just use a little bit kind of a semi-medium to dark tone on that corner. And something similar, maybe even lighter next to our tree here. So they will interact as little cooler segments against a warmer color of the grasses there. Okay. Yeah. Okay, let's come back to that. A bit messy than expected. And then my cooler colors now will start appearing at the front. So I'll use again more magenta than green. I want to use more of a purpley colors so I can actually see them more of a purpley grays. So I want to build up some of the medium tones close to my flower here. I think I'm going to make it now a little bit smaller. Now I'm a bit more happy where it is. Okay. It's a chunk of nice dark shadows. So now I'll start using a bit more separation of tones here at the foreground. What's going to stay slightly dark and what's going to stay slightly into the light towards medium tone. If it's hard for you to spot at the moment, maybe just look out for those shapes I'm finding. Okay, that's our artistic way of breaking into exciting shapes here. So I think I'm going to do that one there like that. So I'm simplifying some of those shadows. That's what will come out. That's better. All of it coming together. So think of it as a shape. Don't think about it anything else. And there is another, that semi-medium tone. Okay. It's almost like another arch. And we've got another last little spot somewhere here. Like all of that shape is need to be filled in, but I'm just trying to leave some of those grasses out. And so I'm not going to lose some of the lines. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's not reflecting as much. And I will work on a couple of reinforcing some of my darker grasses on the foreground, just to give me that feel, am I on the right track with my lines? Am I on the right track with the tones? Okay, it's kind of balances it all together. Okay, that one comes out from there. Okay, that's how those, I'm checking those lines are not parallel. And that shape is going to be slightly darker here as well. It's going to go from dark to medium. Okay, let's make it a bit more medium. So we have that greeny gray. Greeny gray. I think that shouldn't be going too far. That will be fine somewhere here. So very bold shapes. Okay, so I've got like that triangle kind of arch here. Got another one, got another narrow one. So I could just work into its shape. Yeah, those ones, how they're coming out together. Are those ones coming out together? And maybe some of these shapes will come out as well. And so that's how they kind of, they link together and they will work. That might be a little bit too dark for it, but that's kind of the volume of darkness where it's how it's going to be spreading. Otherwise, we're going to get lost in those grasses. Yeah, if we break it down into those big chunks of dark or light, it will be easier for us to do everything else. Okay, I'm going to give you time to finish your greens here like that. I was still working on the foreground. Well, we worked with all our cool greens and medium tones of them, but let's finish the foreground and block everything else of those cooler colors. So I'm going to go for the most darker tones we can get. So for example, some of that darker green, and I think I'm going to use a little bit of violet to make my green even darker. Later on, I want to use some blues to make the green darker, but at the moment I'll go with the same color. Magenta has a little bit more white in it in comparison to the violet, so that will make it much darker very quickly. Okay, so I'll start with some of the easier kind of shapes. What I've left out in pink here at the front. So these are going to blend in a bit more, but I'm just going to fill in the gap, fill in the gap, fill in the gap, just nice and steady. almost like painting by numbers because we've done all the planning here. After the flower, fill in another gap. As you're painting, if you do leave a little bit of pink background, that's lovely. Just see how it's will allow you to leave it. I think that's my petal, but okay, filled in the wrong gap. That's okay. Another, especially close to the stems, kind of the key stems, key lines we were sketching earlier on. If you do leave some of those pinks around them, that's fantastic, but don't worry if you don't. Okay. You'll end up with leaving extra nice arches or any other exciting shapes you like. That's wonderful. That's good. Now this is a tricky part because we've got these very abstract forms. I will, no, I wouldn't. I can put that darker tone. Again, maybe just to support one of my big diagonals. Well, I haven't got any other highlights or any other details on the field. It gives me an opportunity to maybe practice or how far it's gonna go, or if I start repainting it, it's already been tested. There is one line on the painting, is almost a vertical grass going up. Now, I don't want that. If I were to use a similar diagonal, well, maybe I'll just lean it forward. I'm not going to make it perfectly straight. So if you are seeing a nice shape, maybe just be aware it will have to be maybe coming a little bit better for us. That's good. Here's another one. I quite like going for those darker lines into the sky, but as I'm hitting the sky, my brush, the color on my brush becomes immediately super light. So while that is allowing me to work into some of these beautiful light strokes, I'll just do a little bit of that dragging, very gentle dragging. Might even pick up a smaller brush here. So then, well, I haven't got any yellowy greens, so those background grasses will appear much more cooler. They're not interacting with any yellow yet. Yeah, so that's what I was talking about. We don't want much color crossing we want the cool colors almost staying separately from the warmer colors. So I'm just looking for that quality of the grasses over the sky. Okay, I haven't got any of them going off the page here. So maybe I'll put a couple off the page here. So if I'm lifting, one of these grasses ended up pinkish because I almost, instead of applying the color, I've lifted it. And I really like that. Tiny bit more darkness on its top, but all the rest. Less is more. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And maybe one or two over my tree here. Even if you're not going to see it directly, just doing a line over the tree, you're smudging the current colors or lifting some of it. And it just gives you an opportunity to to see that change of the form, change of, yes, something's going over it. I like that a lot. Excellent.
Julia, what size of brush are you using for your little?
This is size 2.
And that's quite a bit smaller than the one you've been using at the beginning.
Yes. So the one I've been using, this one. So I started with like a bigger brush strokes. They're easy to do because it's large brush and it just continues it. If I wanted to do more smaller ones, because I was ending up lifting, it's a smaller, shorter bristles, a bit more firmer brush, so it gives me more precision going over the thick layer of the sky.
They're both flat tops.
That size is, it's not showing because I washed it down. That will be 6, same size. Just rubbed off. Okay. 6. 6 or 4 will be fine. This one's 4. Okay. So I'm happy with our cooler colors. We will come back with them with the foreground, tweaking the nuances, making them a bit more less abrupt, but we've done the major work here. Now I have some warmer colors. So I have some more white. I've got ochre, say magenta and crimson. So that will be for our flowers for later on. But mainly warmer colors. I need ochre for my greens. So I have my emerald green. I've got my olive green, gray, blue. We'll see if we'll use it for some of the highlights again for later on. But let's make some warmer greens combinations. So I've got my piece of paper back. I'm going to use some white. Let's mix it here. Let's use some ochre and some emerald green. Okay. A little bit more white. I don't want it to be overly bold and yellowish green, but a little bit more sunny, but it is an overcast day. Oh, I've got that coolness of those emerald greens and pinks. So I want the yellowness of the ochre staying strong enough for us. Okay, so if I'll use more white and ochre and whatever is left within my bristles of the green, that might be enough. That will be nice. Okay. And I'll use also, I'll try my olive green. Okay, it's very, very light, especially if I'm using it with some white. That's gorgeous as well. And if I mix it with ochre, that will give me the even more highlights of the yellow. Fantastic. I think those are my colors. Okay. So yellowish greens. If your ochre doesn't make your greens light enough, kind of sunny enough, you can use some cadmium yellow. I know some paints sometimes come out slightly differently. So don't be scared of finding your own version or your own color combinations, but that should be enough. So if I'll use my olive green, olive green and ochre, or emerald green and ochre, that should do. That right. So now let's think about the top part of the field, which is going to be all the lighter greens, warmer greens. Let's subdivide it into a couple of areas as well, maybe close to the horizon, roughly on the top part of that field, we'll have more lighter color, and roughly at the bottom part, we're going to have tiny bit more darker colors. So I'll mix more of that olive green and small amount of ochre with some white. Now actually can go for my oils. I don't need my tapes anymore. So I want to make it quite nice and sunny, lighter green. I'm using a size 6 brush. So I'm not going to be fiddling. I don't want to do loads of fiddling. Right, so let's just fill in the spaces we have between some of the grasses. If you leave some pinks, that's great. That could be part of our poppies heads. If you paint most of the space, that's fine as well. There's a little space here, maybe merge our shadow. Maybe merge our shadows here a little. My grass, you know, that big diagonal grass shape, it's very wide, so I need to shrink it. So if I can semi-paint over it, yeah, and that's kind of shrinks it volume. Okay, now I can carry on here. If you are again leaving some of the spaces for some of the flowers, possibly, that's great. If not, don't worry. I think that pink is working beautifully if you can leave it. Okay, just gonna keep. Again, if at some places here I need to shrink that big piece of the dark line, just keep going. Just keep going. Shrinking it a little bit. I'm placing individual strokes over it to make it right. Some more lighter greens at the top here of the field. Maybe just tiny bit over that lovely piece of grass, just to show that little maybe highlights. Okay, close here. I could do just nice big strokes. If you do want to maybe leave a couple of boxes again for maybe ideas of the flowers, you can always fill them in later. Okay, chopping into some of those darker shadows we've been painting. I hope you getting same most wonderful feeling of that, seeing that gorgeous pink background against these beautiful greens. I'm leaving the big boxes of the poppies we sketched earlier on. Okay. Okay, filling all that one in. So I just basically outlined the existing shapes here and having loads of fun of deciding how much pink we're going to leave. Touching up this darker grass with a highlight on top of it. Just did a stroke over it on this top part, kind of gives us a bit more later on opportunity to show that depth. Okay, and the top part of the field again is going to go a tiny bit more lower here. That's it. That's great. I'll probably use the same color, tiny bit more on the shadow here, you know, in the center. I'll just do a little bit of couple of strokes to on top of my darker green, so the colors will start mixing when we start doing all the nuances. Okay, anything else in here? I think that's done. And then the lower part of the field is going to be covered with slightly darker version. So I think I'm going to go same for olive green, maybe a dab of emerald green. That's quite dark actually. So quite a lot of ochre then. Quite a lot of ochre, maybe more olive green than emerald green. Okay. And let's fill the bottom part of this bold, highlighted area of the green here. Okay, I'm still leaving a little bit of them. Remember where we did the slight highlights for the darker tones, you know, with those pale blue, pale green colors. I'm going to leave that one out. Chop into some of these grasses here. Okay. Slightly lower here. Again, in the gaps. Gorgeous. I love that interaction of the pink and the cooler blues with the lighter green, warmer, no, it's not much lighter green, warmer green. Okay. That's really nice. Right, I'm happy with that. I think under my top right tree, I think I'm happy to do a little bit of a shadow. So if I use the same color of slightly darker warm green, maybe just tiny bit of interacting of the warmth. And then maybe it's just shadow, maybe just something across there. Okay. Now we're going to start now interacting our background and the foreground slightly. So I'll start with this darker green I already have on my brush, but I'll use it in very small quantities. So I'll just carry on, for example, one of my grasses, and where my light of that kind of green finishes on a field, I'm going to start carrying it on within my cooler part of the field. So I'll do some of these ones across, almost like a little bit chopping into that coolness. I don't want any chicken legs made if I don't want all the grasses going into one line. Maybe a little bit of somewhere here. Again, it's a little introduction of warmth. Just maybe a little introduction in some of these shapes. So I'm starting to break them down from perfect ones to kind of, they'll start interacting. With colors above. Okay, maybe like that. That's enough. One more here. Fantastic. So I'd say most of my top part of the painting is finished. Now I'm going to go a tiny bit lower to start finishing the painting, and then move further down. So this area is almost there. I just need to put some extra highlights. So I'll use some extra white and any of these yellowish green colors, ochre and green, of either of the greens. I'll try to make it more lighter to show some of the reflections of the sky, maybe still a bit of sunshine left within the colors. So pale any of those greens with ochre white, so any of those lighter options. And again, I'll do very similar strokes, maybe showing the spaces between the grasses, which kind of imaginary grasses in front of me. Okay. Maybe it will be individual small mark between some of the lines we already have. Maybe it will be the opposite. Maybe we can stretch a line kind of going over that, you know, that big shape we had here. I wanted to make a nice, maybe slightly wider. There's my cooler palette here. I wanted to make that paler, grainy, flaky, quite light stroke right before I forget it. It's nice to have it here. One half of it, another half of it. Okay, all these lovely grains reflecting. Yeah. Against the sky, or maybe we're just not seeing it as a strong silhouette. That's great. And I come back with some of those yellowish greens. It looks like a nice spot to have quite a bit of it. Okay, maybe little spots on the side. maybe a couple of wider, bigger lines all the way across. I kind of, I've done them a little bit broken, but it's like a line of light. I'm not saying it's a straight, perfect line. I'm saying it's a line of light, maybe a narrower line of light somewhere else. So it's some exciting chaos of the highlights. Little dots at the background. I'm still trying to keep my pinks in there. It's immediately creates space. That's a lovely line of light. And also if I do smudge, I kind of continue some of my grasses here. So I'm just following some of the shapes we've already been making, and kind of if the colors smudge or if they just bring something new to us. Okay, that's lovely. I left the pinks for the flowers as they are. I haven't done anything else to them. I'm just painting a couple of grasses over them, but nothing big. I think another little highlight, maybe a little bit of more white, maybe somewhere here, and we can see part of the sky, or maybe just extra light in this area. That's lovely. It also feels like I could do with tiny bit more of a paler tree here. I didn't think I'll need it, but I'm gonna give it a go. If you want to put a lighter shape, I think that's will work quite nicely. It just offsets loads of plain grassy lines here. That's nice. I like that. Good. Right, I think all that one is done. Any other highlights on a longer grasses? Again, that's a little bit more of a formula for you, how you can, where you can use those highlights. Doesn't have to be done exactly like mine, but that gives you an idea of kind of directions, or maybe some of the placements. Okay, I'm ready to do the same now with the foreground. Okay, now I'm going to go still for a large brush, but I'm just going to wipe it and keep it. I want to use some cooler colors again. Let's put these brushes aside. So I'll go for my emerald green, some more oil, some white, and some violet or magenta or both. So we're going to come back to one of our medium tones again, close to dark, medium-ish. And with the big strokes, I want to reinforce some of the larger strokes we did, and maybe bring some of the shadows a bit more stronger, kind of combine some of them. So I can feel I can do a little bit more here. Now, every time now I'm going to do a stroke. If I'm going over my lighter fields, I will need to bring my kind of top up my stronger pigment from the palette. Otherwise, I'll be stretching a very light color. Now, if you use the whole kind of your, not just wrist, but the whole shoulder for those big lines, you only need to do a couple of them, maybe for that one when we were working, maybe for this one, then you'll have a better, more pleasant stroke rather than a very wobbly one, okay? So for example, I'm happy with part of it, but the other part is a little bit broken in its kind of curve. So I'm going to do the whole shape of it, okay? That's better. I can tweak if it's gone a bit too wide, that's totally fine. Okay, and let's just bring some of the darker strokes, greener strokes over some of the shapes right in front of us. Okay. Maybe just break some of the simple surfaces. Quite like that paler color when we had quite a bit of violet and magenta with the green. Maybe I just do a darker gray version. Okay, because I want to start getting some of that coolness, the variety of it. Okay, good. Nice. I'm leaving that pinkish area, not because I'm going to have flowers there, but I'm going to put some paler grays, paler blues, paler kind of bluey greens shortly. So I'm still leaving that out. We've got a nice shadow under the poppy here. Might have a bit more darkness here. Anything else needs to be taken off the page here? Kind of continuing some of the lines. I'm taking some of these lines again, a bit more firmer. I'll be getting some of them shapes over, so that's good go. That's nice grassy part, and it changes its darkness here. Okay, all that's gonna come back in a minute. Okay, that's good. Okay, so I'm just getting it a little bit mingled. And I really want to have some darkness now. But maybe a smaller brush. Maybe a little bit smaller brush. So, okay, that's quite a bit of emerald green. I've got some crimson. Crimson is a wonderful red, but against the green, it just makes everything almost blacky, solid darkness. That's what I want now, to get some of the extra highlights, not highlights, depth, to make them, you know, like we were doing highlights on the field on the top. I'm gonna do the same things, but with a little more darker tones, right? I need more thicker paint, otherwise it's very slimy. Violet and green will be another option. I might use that one shortly as well, because I think the red is quite runny. Okay, So let's create a bit of depth. And so small blocks of the dark. So we're right next to those flowers, that main one, right next to that, those stems. We're part of that field, we're sitting right in it. So the depths, we're almost looking down towards the soil. The depth becomes really, really great in darkness. So the pattern of the darks is here. Great, I'm just going to break a couple of shapes in here. They're not looking too similar. So once I've decided on my overall shapes of the darks, I can start smudging them, meaning, for example, if I've got a shape, yeah, we've been working to some of these shapes, and I've got a dark pattern next to it. So my pattern hasn't got quite a nice kind of outer layer for it. So I'll just drag it, and that's no longer the case. I'll just drag it, and that's no longer the case, yeah? So then my shape will stay within some of those diagonals. Let's give us the feel of the spaces between long grasses. Okay. So tricky to do sometimes because you feel like, oh, I've done this, as I love this one. How it's gonna go. You have to let go and give it a try, because we can bring the highlights back. We can get some of the colors preserved, but we also need that variety of tone here. So I'm just going over my darker shapes and finding almost their borders, so they're not just little blocks. They're now part of that grassland. I'm also trying to see if I can link some of my other grasses, which might have been leaning. If not, that's okay as well. Some of them can disappear. Fantastic. And then finally, any darker, thinner lines, which we'll need to merge to kind of to go out. I love that one, how it's there. I don't think I'm going to be touching it. I can touch up that line, maybe touch up a couple of grasses on the top. So I'm going to use my smaller brush. So that's a size 2 with that darker color, emerald green and violet, or emerald green and crimson. So just to double check some of that strength of its interaction, I'll top up my brush after each stroke. Okay, this one could have some seeds, so I think it's very elongated, very close to us. Okay. Also can do a couple of highlights. Now it's shape. Good. Right, back to very dark green. That's cool green. So my lines are following some of the highlights on the yellow field, or following some of the shapes. So they're supporting me. We didn't do them for nothing. They're there for us to be used. So we're connecting the highlights of the fields with the taller grasses coming from the shadow. Okay, this one's at the front or the back, or partially at the front, partially at the back. So let's have a look. So because we have a small brush, it just smudges the colors we're going through. Yeah, it brings that darkness in certain places. That's wonderful, but it also connects. Yeah, quite like that. Okay, fantastic. And so if we've done the super darks, we'll do some highlights. So some white, and any of that paler green, maybe bluey green, maybe a dab of magenta. So it's not just direct green. It's kind of that very pale greeny blue, greeny violet color. So we're going to do some highlights on a couple of these grasses for the foreground. So this time I'm going to work mainly on the bottom part. So for example, that lighter grass is here. Just want to make it slightly fresher in line. It's kind of appears from nowhere, it disappears into nowhere. Some of these feathery shapes we're working. Now you can put them over your existing grasses, or you can put them underneath, or you can try a bit of both. So that's, I'm just going to make it slightly feathery. I want to have to pick up fresh paint very often. Okay, so that looks quite nice as a group of these feathery strokes. So if you press with your brush really gently, just really skip the surface. Yeah, so we've got those lovely cone shapes, so that's lovely. And I'm going to come back, you know, where we left a bit of pink band for the highlights, so I'm going to put some more of that color here, and again just create it into turn it into more grasses. If you want to just paint it over first to get rid of most of the pink, that's fine as well. Might be a quicker way of doing it. Okay, and a little bit more across here as well. It's quite thick paint, so I might need to apply it quite thickly here. Okay, and again another of the same. So it's like a layer cake, but some lighter greens, medium greens for the warm greens. Then we had highlights on them. And now we have this super pale green, but cool. And then we had the mingled darks and lights of the cooler grasses. So once I filled it in, I can again, I just smudge them within the existing grasses lines, or up or down, or find any other of those lighter tones, dragging. They could be coming up some of the longer grasses here. I need some fresher color here. Otherwise it's getting darker. And after each stroke, I'll need to reload the brush. And just touch up a couple of the strokes here as well. The mingling now much more. Or if they're going a bit more that way. Lots of light, feathery shapes on top here. If I overwork something, I can just bring the darker color back. This is quite nice, just lifting, just scratching the color back. You can see a bit of pink there as well. It's nice. Oh, that's beautiful. I might do some of that scratching here, actually. Oh, lovely. That makes it extra grassy, but it gives us subtones. Much easier than applying the very pale colors with a brush. We can just scratch them. Got loads of feathery things in here, but I think I'm going to be careful of not overdoing them. So I'll carry on with a couple of highlights here. Sit. And then maybe just gently introduce some of the scratches. A little bit at a time. I keep wiping my stem of the brush so it's not bringing too much color with it back. Oh, really like that. Really, really like that. Okay, a couple of my darks need to be touching here. Kind of sharpening a couple of highlights. Okay. Right, now I'm gonna do the flowers, and I'll go for fresh brush, nice clean brush, some oil, some fresh white. So if I've been using this white for greens, I'll use it from the other side so it stays clean. Now I have quite a lot of purple pinks in it, so I'll keep it as my main color. However, I also want to use a little bit of warmth. So if I'll start with magenta and white. Now we don't have to repaint the whole flower. If some of the original background color will stay as it is, that's totally fine. So that's very close to my background color here. I'll start with the tops of the petals. So they might smudge into my grass or might find more of a defined outline for the shape of the flower, making them slightly wider to what they will remain, because it's easier to do those strokes rather than being very defined. I'm mainly looking for the outer silhouette of the petals here. Okay, maybe going a little bit up, a little bit down, where the highlights are going to be on this side. Okay, let's go higher. Okay, good. Maybe a little something. Okay, it's quite green here. Greeny yellow. Let's make it more pinky. Okay. Now I do want it to make quite deep in color, so I'll go much stronger magenta. I will put a hint of orange in it afterwards, but I want to build up kind of cooler reds first. That's why I'm using the magenta. So cooler reds, a bit more close to some of this white, even darker maybe. So I'm going to shrink my white line first of all. In some places it will go to nothing, in some places it will remain a little, and I'm going to drag my strokes towards the center of the flower. So if they'll remind me of the shapes of the petals, that's will be great. I want quite a dark tone here, maybe even a dab of crimson here. I hope I didn't pick up any green there. No. If you are picking up any green, just keep mixing it with your within your palette and applying again a fresher color. I just want to get rid of some of that light. Okay, good. Now I'm ready to introduce some orange. So I have a cadmium red or cadmium orange sometimes. If you haven't got it, yellow with crimson will do the trick. I might actually put a little bit of that. Yeah, we only need it for a couple of strokes, but it will make big difference in the warmth of the flower. Will make them more poppies, more stronger in its base. Now, before I start mixing those colors, well, I have my darker version of them magenta. I'll put a couple of strokes over my poppies, fresh poppies, or if you lost some of the poppies, and this is your opportunity to kind of reintroduce few strokes. So I might use a smaller brush for it. So I'll have a smaller brush. Let's say if I want to poppy somewhere here, I'll just do a tiny bit of a stroke and maybe another tiny bit of a stroke. kind of giving it an idea there's a flower, but not building much details. Or anywhere else, I think I want a couple of poppies over the sky. I can build more if I needed to. I'll probably stay with less. That's lovely. Or if you need to sharpen any other shapes or kind of make it a bit more scattered. For example, some of those pink areas, they're lovely, but if you were to look close, they're a bit more geometric in shapes, they were at least. Okay. Another super dark, before we go into warm colors of the flower, very dark, almost like solid magenta darkness. Maybe even with a bit of crimson to make it extra dark. I think I need more violetty. We're going to do a little bit of a hint of a flower somewhere here. So I'm looking for the strokes between the grasses to have just a color. I'm not looking for specific shape looking like a flower shape. I'm looking for a hint of a pattern. Yeah, something there, maybe slightly bigger, so that's better. More close together so they're not too separate. Got this pink line left, so maybe that's it. And that will give me a couple of darker shapes on my poppy. For example, for the bottom part of the flower and that folded individual petal, it's smudging into the grass. So I'll just persevere a little. Yeah. We can't quite see it there yet, but we'll come back to that area. Okay. Blending it in there. And I'm also going to make a slightly darker tone, so the same color, just within that center, not all the way down, not all the way down. Okay. I need a tiny bit more cleaner magenta there. I think cadmium red in it and mixed with my greens. So I need to reload my brush, maybe get some violet. That's a nice fresh color. Couple of more strokes, almost there. So my violet mixed with, okay, that's very dark. Magenta. That's a nice strong, bold color. Okay, quite a lot of thick white paint there. Just want to place it there more solidly as a color. And I want to place it more solidly as a color across my flower. I'll have to persevere mixing it, kind of creating a darker shadow within it. That's it. It's good. And I think the same will need to come up at the bottom part of the, just I need one stroke here. Okay, just a little bit lighter. It will, again, it will settle with our orange colors very shortly. Okay, violet and purple's finished. Again, a clean brush. For now, orange and some white. Okay, nice bold orange. And a dab of yellow in it. So it will start to glow with sunlight. I'll start with a couple of dots on my smaller flowers. So it's kind of the tops of the flowers going to have a bit of light in them. Okay. Maybe some of the strokes. If you're picking up any green, keep bringing the brush back to the palette and getting it fresh, getting the pigment nice and fresh. Okay, not too much, I think. I think I'm happy with that. Maybe a stroke over this area. There's very little going on this corner, so I think I could do a couple of strokes. That's beautiful. And I'll use the same fresh orange and yellow on my poppy, just over some of the colors, bringing it a bit more on the top here, kind of showing that transparency of the petals, combining all these colors together just with individual strokes, and then loading the brush again. Individual stroke, loading the brush again. If the paint gets mucky, we have to mix new one. Okay, maybe a little bit fresher paint here for me. More yellow, more orange. Okay, I don't like this perfect line, so let's just work into that. That's it, it's gone. Maybe some of that white border could just go gently under some of the strokes. Maybe another shape here. Okay, it's quite thick paint, so I just need to be carefully placing it. Getting a little fold here. Okay, might just leave it at that. Okay, it's quite a lot of green paint here. So by leaving a lot of the flower out earlier on, we have avoided. I don't like this at all. I think I'll lift it off and maybe even get rid of that red and paint something with green. If I'll do one more red stroke and it works, then I'll leave it. If it doesn't, I'll paint it with green. That's better. Excellent. I'll touch up the greens afterwards, but now I'm going to do a bit of violet for the center of the poppy. Get it maybe even with a dab of green and red to make it extra dark. It's the bottom line I need to make sharp. I have quite a lot of paint there, so brush can be making some strokes we might or not want to do. A couple of highlights, and no, that's not quite all right. Just smudging it a little bit with the existing colors to make it less significant. And then again back my darker tone. That's better. That's it. Okay. And to touch my leaf, I'll just work with my green brush. Touch my petal here. Get that shape back. And I think I've lost that stem here, which I can just draw back. And then carry on with any of these lovely lines. Make it less sharp. Okay, smudge that one. Right, so that's all. The rest is tweaking the shape of my flower, which I just smudged by accident. But I can come back to it. Okay, so I will tweak tiny bit of the center of my flower once we're finished, but otherwise the whole process of the painting is there. Loads of layering of the greens and exciting reds at the end of it.